We are going to call this meeting to order now. This is the House Study Committee on Reporting Requirements for Local School Systems. In our third meeting, third and final meeting, we have a copy of an agenda. Did every member of the committee get a copy of the agenda? Did we give some to them? We only printed a few agendas, but we only have a few people here, so we'll... Yeah, the agenda is short. Let me welcome those of you who chose to come here instead of the State Board of Education meeting. We're glad you're with us. You can see we do have a relatively brief agenda. And let me go over it just so we're all on the same page. We are going to give you all a chance for any input that you want to have before we go on any further with the agenda on those topics. And that notwithstanding, if you have comments or if you want to make some discussion of the later parts of the agenda, certainly we'll be open to that. We have received some information from David Reynolds with Dalton Public Schools. That will be on the discussion today. It doesn't directly deal with something that the legislature, I think, controls. It's more something that DOE does, but we're going to talk about it anyway. And then following that, we will spend the balance of our time looking at what needs to be a part of the committee report, and hopefully get enough of that done that we can get something typed up and ready for you all to sign, and so we can get it turned in. Just for the record, why don't you all introduce yourselves too, so everybody knows who's here. We're glad that you are all with us. I'm glad each of you all are here. David Casas is not able to be with us this morning, or this afternoon, I guess it is now. We will communicate with him what we accomplished today to get his input if anything needs to be changed based on what he wants to add to it. We'll take a few minutes now and open it up for you all to any input that you want to have. Thank you. I had talked with Dr. Bennett Monday at the biennial conference, and so he did let me know that he would be tied up with the state board meeting. Gentlemen? Appreciate that. I think one of the things that we'll get to when we talk about the committee report is not just when we don't need a report, don't have it, but when we have a report that frequently is needed for some period of time, let's make sure that there's a way to get it out of there when its useful shelf life is finished. Right. Jim, do you have anything you want to add?
Say the same as what they did, and I just appreciate being here and the opportunity to learn.
Let me pass out to the members a copy of this information from David Reynolds.
I'm glad Alan's good for something.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, it does. Right. Let's do this. Let me give you just a brief overview of what you're going to read about in here, and I'll give you a few minutes to read this. It really makes some complicated reading. But you've got 4 pages of his email dialogue, and then that's followed by 3 pages of charts. I warned Dr. Bennett that we were going to be looking at this and told him I didn't want to blindside him with this because this particular individual has some strong feelings about this issue, which basically what he's looking at is reports required by different departments within the Department of Education that ask for information that the other department has already asked for. And of course, the bottom line is, if both departments need to have it, one ought to get it from the other rather than forcing the local system to round up that data several times it needs. The 3 pages at the end are examples he tracked over a year's time or part of time. I think this one deals with a Title III report and an ESOL report. And he's cross-referenced every place that one report asks for something that's already been turned into the other report. I did not arrange for David Reynolds to be here, and we might not really be able to understand exactly what some of these elements are without him here. Even though I've looked at some of these reports, I'm not sure I know exactly what he's talking about with some of these elements, but I get the flavor of what he's saying. So let me give, because they've not had a chance to see, the other members of the committee haven't had a chance to see it, let me give them just a couple of minutes to look through his...
It's what he's suggesting, having one master report that could be used by multiple divisions or departments.
I don't know that he's saying one master report, although I think he alludes to something of that at one point there. But certainly for different departments within the Department of Education to communicate so that they're not asking for the same thing, that where they need a piece of information that is already there, and certainly a great deal of it is there from other reports, that they will get that information from the DOE database rather than from the local schools.
So, for example, the federal department of the DOE, all the federal programs, if you had one report in for the federal, they could all use it. Something like that. Okay.
You know, we talked about this to a certain degree with the comprehensive sort of consolidated report that has to be done. None of this is actually referencing that consolidated report, so, but a lot of that information is contained within that consolidated report also.
So it could be a
I
consolidated.
think it's a prime indication that divisions within DOE are not communicating with each other. And this has been going on for eons. This is not anything new.
But, you know, in DOE's defense, that's typical of local school systems too. I mean, I got the same kind of complaints from local schools when I was superintendent. Hey, you know, why are you asking for this? Somebody else asked for it 2 months ago.
Right.
And, so we all need to learn. I mean, that's a bureaucratic problem at whatever level you want to look at. But it is something that I think we need to address and
And I think the department is aware, in any organization of any size, trying to keep everybody corralled in. It does not say that we're not understanding we need to be changes, especially when we get to things like surveys.
Right.
We have a number of people that need to execute surveys for either for a program or something. So we're trying to funnel things through a common channel to make sure that there's no redundancy or people aren't asking for information that's already available in some other source. So we're trying to vitalize that back into something that's either that or data elements or any of those type of things. I have not had a chance to look at here, but obviously, any way we can try to minimize redundancy in reporting that already exists. I know they've already been having some discussions on how we can have a collective repository for everything that we collect.
Right. That's kind of where I was coming from.
When they were meeting with the SIS advisory committee, one of the things that came out of that was to have some sort of metadata repository or something we could build where we could have a lot more information, what feeds what and how they all work interacting. So I know those things are being discussed even as this is coming out.
I suspect that, although I don't know, based on what I can read here, he apparently has made some effort to communicate with the State Department previously. I think both of the reports that he's talking about here, the Title III and the ESOL, probably much of the information is mandated by federal requirements, I would assume.
Right.
And I think we need to be careful that we don't, as departments within DOE or within the legislature, getting into habit of saying, well, yeah, but that's required by the feds. The same logic of having a clearinghouse and sharing the information will apply to federally required information that flows through the State Department.
Right. I would also venture to say that sometimes not every organization or request that we get asked for it exactly the same way, or they may report it slightly differently. All students means all students. All students, non-special ed means something else. But when people refer to all students, sometimes in their mind that means all students, non-special ed. And to some people that means all students. So sometimes there is just definitions of what terms mean. So it may not be apparent on the surface or look like we're asking for the same things, but we'll be asked to report it sometimes differently. That's a poor excuse, but I mean, other than just to say that sometimes what it appears to be on the surface is not necessarily the way it shakes out, what it is. When you go actually read the definition of what they're requiring, it may be something slightly different, which means we have to go back out to districts and ask for it slightly different ways.
They're telling us we need to get you all closer
Okay.
to the microphone. But it'd be real nice if y'all want to just get real chummy and just kind of all slide down there next to each other. And maybe that'll keep you from having to have to walk to the microphone every time you talk.
We can pass this sucker around.
Mr. Chairman, this LEA application plan here, is that the same as consolidated application he's talking about? Is that,
I think that would be,
LEA application?
no, I don't think that's the,
I had LEA written down one time before we talked about it.
you'll see the LEA, that's simply an acronym for
Local education
Local
agency.
education.
The point you just lifted up is about all, when you say all students, when I say special ed, all, yes, or whatever. But then you, all, not including special ed, that's another thing.
Well, over the years, I think what's happened too, remember before NCLB, and I can only speak from my experience, when I was at a local district 10 years ago, all students generally was perceived to be all non-special ed students. And that was just the way things were counted before you start having things like NCLB. Well, NCLB changed a lot of that, and so, just making sure everybody's on the same page with when we define the terms exactly what we mean by that. And also that it may not be exactly what it appears on the surface, because they have so many data elements, and you see a short name for it, and then sometimes you have to go back and see what that really means.
Another example of this is how much do you spend per student? There are 100 different ways to find that. And if you don't clarify what it is you're finding and how you're finding it, then it's a wide difference in what you get.
We have a student information system that we've got now. Do we have that in place over all the parts of the student information system?
Not completely functional yet.
I can get you some more information.
Not totally in place yet, right? Close.
But when that gets in place, will they not be able to get most of the information? You would think, we would be able to generate this country report at home system-wide, because it don't have the information on each student. One would think if the information is available on their computer, they would have to sit back down for the school system to go in there and come up with reports. Let DOE go through the reporting system there, have a program or whatever, and generate their own reports.
Absolutely. If the department had that information, there would be no need to re-request it. By the same token, it depends on how granular is the information that we have.
If the information is set to DOE August 31st, September 1st, it's already outdated. So, I mean, that's going to be how they implement that system. Is it updated on
I think data requirements are an ongoing issue. And as they evolve, you guys come back to us and say, we need additional information, or we need it sliced this way. For instance, what if I only collect the total number of days a student is absent, but I don't collect the reason? Now I have to go back and say which days you were absent. If I ask for a field that says total number of days absent, well, the student was absent 7 days. Well, was that excused or not excused? Well, we only capture total days absent. I mean, it's just those kinds of things. So how granular does that need to be? So depending on what the question is to begin with, it depends on how detailed we have to get with being able to fulfill either legislative requirement or federal requirement.
I thought the student information system we've been working on for the last 2 years. How long has this been going on?
20 years.
20 years.
30 years.
30 years.
QBE.
late 1800s?
QBE.
I'm just saying,
Seriously.
and all many times it's been changed, and everything, but I thought this was going to be captured just about any type of data that you want the student was going to be plugged into this facility.
I believe that once this one's in place, it will be able to get that kind of information.
The operative word was, once this gets in place.
So, yeah, that's why.
And it hasn't gotten in place. The projections are it won't get in place. But there's going to be a continuing updating, I think, as we have indicated, of the type of information that's required. Each different type of information requires new programming. So this is just an ongoing, issue. But another factor is the cost.
Yeah.
And the cost begins to escalate. And I can recall the last time that the department came over when Speaker Murphy, was still here. And they wanted $50 million more. And of course, he went into a tirade. And finally he said, all right, I know you need information. This is the last time. Don't come back over here and get it fixed. Well, it wasn't until the next year that all of that was gone, plus the fact you have governors who want to have different kinds of technology commissions. And each one of those, as they try to go to compatibility and things of this nature, change how they approach things. And therefore, you're looking for new equipment. Well, if I change equipment up here, you've got to be compatible with what I have out in the school districts. Well, the school districts can't wait on the state to ultimately figure out what they want to do, because they've already told us what we have to give them. So we can do this. Well, when we've done it, and finally they said, send it to us, I can recall we crashed, the entire system up here. Well, not just we, but I'm talking about school districts. Mm-hmm. But in DeKalb itself, the issue was you can't accept our platform. Therefore, we had to come up with the black box to convert, information to that which would be acceptable by the state. Well, now they're going into yet another system. So all of this stuff continues to move, and I'm sure it moves in accordance to, the advancements of technology. But the state can't keep up with it. We can't keep up with it as the state might want us to. And so there is this continuing issue, of problems.
Kind of moving target,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All the software that y'all have to deal with, is this proprietary, custom-made software, or is it somewhat commercially available, say, across the country to other systems, or can you use it built on a platform, say, available at programs used at, Office Depot, like an Excel program?
Sir? No. You can policy.
They were commercially available software that we bought. Excuse me. It was commercially available software that we procured. I mean, it had to be customized, as anything has to be customized to work in your environment.
Get customized templates inside the
Right.
commercially available software?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
You would think, Chairman, that there'd only a finite number of ways to go out here and slice and dice this data. I mean, you've got to have, innumerable reports out here on everything, it seems like. I don't know how we can keep coming up with ways to go in here and do this.
Well, I was fairly involved in this 20 years ago when I was in the technology area. And it is a difficult proposition. I mean, you layer on top of everything that Gene has talked about, the difference between the capabilities of a system the size of the DeKalb versus the system that has 300 or 400 students, or 1,000 students, or even 5,000 students. It's not just what software they have, it's the people that they're going to have available to implement them, to maintain equipment, to do the data entry, to all the things that are a part of this process.
I've had to go over students, I go back to a spreadsheet and accounting work on my.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't be a part of this state network. So the state's not going to let you do that, because if they don't get your data, then none of their reports are really accurate, or as accurate as accurate should be. So, I mean, I'm anxious to see it come to a conclusion and get us a statewide data information system. But I also have concerns. I mean, we talk about it ought to have all this information in it. At some point, we've got to be a little concerned about, are we gathering too much information on kids and parents out there, and how we're going to maintain the security of that, so that we protect the rights of individuals. But those are not discussions that we need to really solve today, I guess. But within the confines of what we do have, I think that we need to encourage the Department of Education to continue to work on this problem. Did anybody have any other questions?
Well, we have what recommendations do we want to make? If you got some of your recommendations for us to make?
I have a blank page here ready to write down your recommendations. And I've got some ideas of my own.
First, this is not to do away with force, this is consolidated application that they're doing and working on now. The biggest request I had is that it has been a nightmare. But don't change the format, for God's sake, give them a couple of years to leave it alone. I think we got it where they can work something out. Not going in and change it for a couple of years again. That should have been or Jack, can you feel?
Sure. Absolutely.
People tell me this. They had to work on just the second year.
It's been on for,
9 years, 8 years.
yeah. They keep trying to improve on it, and they have training, for folks to help them at the local systems level to understand what changes they've made. And when you start putting all of these programs in this consolidated plan, it becomes a rather complex report. And
all cut and paste, and it goes from, they have to look at it from umpteen different ways.
absolutely.
I think that Dr. Bennett did say that they had managed to find more of those areas where they already have the information that will come pre-plugged with more of what the state already has than has been the case in the past. But we want to encourage minor improvements, not major overhauls for a few years.
There is minor changes.
Are there reports, Skip talked about the gender equity report, which is one that I have some concerns about. It's the kind of report that to me ought to be, was probably needed in its full-blown status for a year or two when we first begin to look at the status of gender equity. But to me, at this point, some of that information ought to be required once there's been a complaint, not on an annual basis. I talked to several of the Oceans and Systems who actually prepared the report, and they talked in terms of 3 and 4 days of doing nothing but gathering the information that was required for that report. That doesn't make sense, and that's not even mega system where they've got 10 or 15 high school. That was one person in one high school gathering information for that high school and middle schools that there. Let me bounce an idea off of it that I thought about with the gender equity report. The accounting system, the financial accounting system, certainly has the capacity to provide State Department automatically with expenditure based on the different activities broken down by gender, I would think, which by itself we've flashed and haven't learned how to turn off the quick belt.
You just sent me that?
Oh, I couldn't extend that to you. And with that financial information, you get a pretty good snapshot of what a local system's doing gender equity wise. Without gathering all of the enrollment information and all of the participation information, and your organization skips providing that information with any activity that's new, if I'm not mistaken. With gathering the financial information, which the state already has, and would require more action by the local system, would that be sufficient?
Problem.
That's so? If you can't completely live with that?
Now, is this you got a report number, or is that take a particular statute? I know
Yeah, that one will. I think.
that was Title 9. Okay, yeah, it was Title 9. I had that the other
Now,
time.
it would require us to make some code changes because the code currently calls for certain information to come from the Department of Education that we would have to say, have to narrow down to the financial information.
Yeah, right now it requires us to include information regarding expenditures and participation rates and all that. So eliminate that language about participation rates.
What about if there's a complaint in the local system? Should that
I'm sorry.
One or two last year?
I don't think there was any last year. Year before last, there was 2. But to my knowledge, we had no infractions this past year at all. And I don't know about the current school year. This was for last school year.
If a complaint is filed, the same information could be readily compiled by using the financial report data. And it breaks down, I think, gender equity on a lot of it's athletics, is that correct? And so it shows how much is being spent on each kid in each athletic program.
It shows how much is total being spent. It shows how many,
For activity.
and what the participation is. How many male students, how many female students, and how many potential students there are. So you got 1,000 students, 400 females, 600 males. 80 are playing football, 80 males, 3 females. That's what I think. That's pretty much what it was. But the report currently requests that information not just on what the local system's spending, but also what the booster clubs are spending, even down technically, if the newspaper chooses to print schedules, that's a financial. So, I mean, it gets pretty detailed.
That's the gender equity.
Gender.
If the same data can easily be compiled, by another source,
They won't have access to participation rates. There's nothing that I know of that the state has currently that would show how many kids are playing football. But, at some point in the future, that's one of those things that probably will show up on the student database. But currently, the only thing they would be able to gather what state level has, as far as I know, would be financial information. How much is spent.
But the school systems would be, or the school itself would know which kids are participating in which program, would they not?
Yes, but it is.
So that information is filed and readily available in case of a complaint. There's no need for them to generate it and regurgitate it back into another form, piece of paper or electronic file. So in case of a complaint and or ensuing legal action, that would be able to be compiled and prove one way or another how it's operating.
I want to say DOE gathers that information already. Not to that detail.
But that will be at some point, I think, or,
I could answer that.
I do not know.
okay, so at this point, it would probably require subpoena action in order to get it, or just a open
Open
record
record.
request?
Open record.
Now, are y'all tying into this 20-3-316, what the Athletic Association has to report every year?
That's a separate report.
That's a separate, DOE does a report, and then GHSA does a report. And GHSA does a report on any complaints.
Right, they do this, it goes back to the code section 20-2-315, that's those requirements related to the Athletic Association function.
See, DOE didn't even know GHSA was making a report. The DOE receives a copy of the report.
We're doing away with one, but they still like to get the information from the school system to do away, right? I asked you about the association's got to get the information, so.
But they're only doing it in the case of a complaint.
Right.
They're not having all that information on everything.
That's basically a CYA action.
The Athletic Association shall deliver on October 1st, 2003, every year, procedure report. Shall assume regarding compliance with paragraph 1 of the subsection, issue report, number, type, disposal of request for the association. So, okay, so that's only if they have requests for information regarding complaints and things like that. So, if we change that, then we'll be saving some reporting. Good. Well, here, save some reports.
Same information available for that.
Basically, what it boils down to is remove language related.
I think DOE does one on participation lottery.
Well, I'm sure the athletic association would want to brag about the athletes that are nurturing and
Be
sponsoring.
quiet, be quiet,
Absolutely.
be quiet.
By all means.
Mr. Chairman, what about this 20-2-212 report that was about the list of Georgia beginning salaries by three fields, calculate the maximum base salary? We had something like that was reported in another area, I thought. That's done annually, goes to the State Board of Education, House Representatives, and State Committees. You have that one in your, that's size, don't you? And in the governor's report, what is it, he's got that education commission that is not in place now, that's not.
It doesn't have it anymore.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you talking about the IE2 thing?
No,
Or that education commission that was under
The
law
governor's council, that council is,
that he canceled?
did he cancel? Council.
He canceled the council.
We need to change the, away with it.
Is a market-sensitive salary schedule still in law?
Was that coordinating
So
council?
which,
Is a market-sensitive study?
Yeah, it was 20-1, council division number 4, general
Oh, I know they are.
Remember, I heard the first one.
I think it's still in law, but
like this?
That was quote the council.
Yeah, I'm just not important to you. Let's start that one.
The salary, you're throwing out too many from my little
I'm sorry.
head to handle at one time. Go back to the salary. Is that CS1 you're talking about?
This is on this list that education report requires right here. And what we do, I had made a note there, asking the question, said something about CPI reporting. And then I thought that was, is that a necessary animal there?
CPI, you gotta have that.
unless the beginning salary by degree and field used to calculate the minimum salary
Experience
base.
factor and
That we have more way to see about that.
Teachers earned.
Yeah, that would come in under
State allotted,
CPI.
state allotted, state paid.
again, not until
I would think so.
About the,
It's the only place
how
I
do
know
you
is
say
we get it.
when
The
the
list of Georgia
student data record is there, I think.
Has to leave that in.
I don't have that with me.
Well, it'd be a year old, or 2 years old, but you have every system, school system's audit report for the state, you've got all the salaries in there, so you give it a regional item.
You have a CPI report that goes in, I think it goes in 3 times a year. And that CPI report lists each person by name, social security, certification, position, or where they're hired, and that goes into the state. All right, from that, they figure out what your training and your experience factor will be, so that you can come back in and fund that, on the salary schedule. So they've got all of that information on CPI reports. Now, to what de-
I didn't know there was no place for it.
So they could take, I don't know if that's what that means right there.
That's
but
that's
you-
what he's referring to as the CPI.
Mhm.
Any other recommendations?
Not unless we need to do something about that council that the governor's done with, I'll report it, if we do it, report the requirements they have, or we're still not requiring the system to do the reports at all. If the council's no longer in place.
Talking about
That's
Coordinating
65% thing?
Yeah, education, coordinating, I'm sorry.
All the reports that we're required to do?
ECC.
Coordinating council that.
Is that education coordinating council, is that what it is?
Replaced by the agency heads or something?
It doesn't give the real name here, this is on that second report we had out, it's 20-14-5, the council should issue a report each year, summary, the governor's chairperson of the council, that's that state committee to see if it's appropriate. Issue findings, reports, they got issued just to the governor, and the General Assembly. The issue of report regarding governor and secretary of education should be submitted no later than December 1st. Report regarding post-secondary education. All kinds of report requirements here, but they're not doing anything. For sure they got on these reports.
When they renamed that, what's the title now? Coordinating agency heads?
No, that council name still is the same thing. No update change.
No, the agency heads that have a part in education, coordinating council, the agency that they've got a.
There's a name, I can't pull it.
I don't believe they have that anymore, but what they do
No,
have,
I think they reactivated that, yeah.
did they reactivate?
And they called it something else, I'm not sure what it is.
Governor Lawrence created the coordinating.
That's right.
Yeah.
Governor Perdue created this agency head.
Now, there is an agency heads group that's called the Alliance of State Agencies.
I think
And,
that's what
and
it is,
he
yeah.
named Kathy Cox to be the chair of that. And so it's almost a P16 type of issue. But I think this is probably one of the real important things that is being done right now.
We're not talking about anything with that. That alliance of agencies. But if there is no longer a coordinating council, and reports that would be required of that coordinating council.
My knowledge.
We'll research that.
That's, I don't know, that's just some pages, back pages up there.
If it's not in existence anymore, why have it on the book? That's what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And your research will show that, yeah. But if the governor wants to stay on the books, then he can stay on the books.
Here it is. I have walking.
Excuse me.
Is that market-sensitive study thing still in the law? Well, I think it's over.
Market-sensitive salary schedule that was initiated at the very beginning of QBE, that annually there was to be a market-sensitive salary schedule done, and then it would be used to base the teacher salaries on. It was done one time and was proven that it was totally out of the question. We couldn't raise the salaries that high, and has never been done again. Is it still on the books? It's only been done one time, and that was done in 83, 84.
Find the law,
We'll find it.
try to take care of it.
It was in QBE on a market-sensitive salary schedule.
Would that have been in
It was one of the
2012?
ones that was conveniently forgotten in law.
I'm not sure, Betsy, that might have been 20-2212,
Well,
but I'm not positive.
We couldn't afford it, so
211
we did away with it. I don't think it was ever taken off the books.
Any other specific report areas that we want to look at?
What do you think?
Looking down the line.
There's another one that I'm concerned about, and I don't know what we need to do yet, but this driver's license requirement reports that we're having to do for
What you
schools.
said, y'all.
The TADRA,
Already.
the TADRA,
Yeah, for the suspension of the driver's license before, and I understand that's a nightmare with, we've sent like 25,000 names or something that she was to do
The situation, that's
possible suspensions, they processed 10,000 of them.
They're needed.
And it's the information that the DMV or the Department of Driver Services is getting, they can't use because it comes in without valid social security numbers, no driver's license numbers. Instead of calling James C. Smith, other just, they say we need to cancel Bubba Smith's driver's license. And they just, and
And the department,
Well, social security number is a information you can't give out. I'm not sure the schools get a social security number, you know, they do.
And I think now they're going to have student numbers.
Right.
That's not going to be, that won't tie anything with DMV. Student number's not going to have to do anything there.
And one of the main problems that you have there is, again, the same thing we were talking about earlier with the whole computer system. They kept changing who you report to. It was reported to the department. The department then had to report it to this group, and that group said, no, we don't want it anymore, and so they gave it to a third group. So then each one of them had to then set up their system. And what you're saying is the result. It's just a backlog. Even in a school district our size, we may have about, at this time of year, some 2,600 students with 14 or more unexcused absences. But reporting to, under the TADRA, we're only reporting about 386 students. So, well, that's because really the principals, I guess, they start to look at this thing and they get overwhelmed because of the emphasis that we put on attendance taking and all of this type of thing, and it doesn't get done. Now that we're putting more emphasis on it, last year I didn't have but 100 for the year. Well, up to this time, we've got 300 and something. So we're beginning to get the reports in, of the students who have these absences. The whole idea behind TADRA was to have an incentive for high school attendance. Take my license away, that hurts. Therefore, I should come to school. But if we don't enforce it on the upper level or the lower level, then it doesn't do it.
Like a toothless tiger.
Huh?
Like a toothless tiger.
That's exactly.
Within our report, I would suggest that we recommend a review of that rather than taking some kind of action on that.
Yeah.
The driver's license issue is a strong part of the governor's.
Oh, I'm not saying, I'm not saying yet we'll do away with it.
But we can certainly recommend reviewing what the current status of it is and if there needs to be something.
Well, I think definitely something needs to be done. We've got 25,000 names going in, there might be less than 10,000 of them.
Yeah.
And I've got some data on that, I've been digging through that.
Well, with list of problems y'all are aware of, then somebody needs to look at it.
Well, there's a lot of reporting time in the school system involved with that. These people got to keep up with a whole bunch of time. And they've got bad information in the school systems as far as if they have to go for a hearing, somebody's requesting a hearing about it for the school system. Evidently, they've got to have a administrator show up at the hearing down there. So we need a whole lot of clarification on that, because that's taking a whole lot of time from the school's perspective on this.
Yeah, you're right.
Ross?
I'll be through.
Well, those are good things, huh?
How many reports can we, like say, do a cut and paste on the NCLB requirements? Our friend from Dalton City Schools here mentions a lot of things reflecting back to No Child Left Behind requirements. Could we piggyback on federal reports that are already required and use those as the copies for what the state needs?
All of those reports, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of those reports that are required by No Child Left Behind actually go to the state. They don't go to the feds from the local school system.
They come through the department.
Very good. So,
Most of the NCLB requirements, if I'm correct, come from the student record, which the state already collects annually. And then most of it is gleaned from that to produce NCLB. And it sounds like a lot of what he's talking about are some of these Title III and these specific programs that may not have been brought into the entire fold yet, or consolidated application, which still needs to be. We're hearing, make minor modifications where it's dropping data in the right spaces for us, but, don't make any major modifications.
After those modifications are made, piggyback some of this on that information in that format?
Without getting into the nuts and bolts, I would not feel comfortable responding one way or the other until I can see exactly what it is. No, I mean, honestly, I see where they're going with it. Well, I mean, on the surface, that seems, very obvious, but let me see specifically what they're asking for, so I can tell you more definitively.
I just want to see duplicative state requirements. We can't help what the Fed's doing.
Right.
And we have to do that. But any of our state reporting, we piggyback on the same data set. There's no reason requiring a duplicative state report if we could use the federal version and just do it once.
Yeah, 17 of the 20 items listed are no child left behind, 17 of the 20. And some of those items may not be necessary, they may not have to ask it in another way. They might could combine.
Exactly.
So that's another animal.
It's a big beast to have a team, I know. Thank you, gentlemen.
I would hope, in general terms, that our report will reflect a couple of things. One of which would be to say, in the future, we've looked at a lot of the reports that are already out there, but let's put down some recommendations for the future. If legislation is going to require a report from the DOE staff or from local systems, there ought to be a sunset provision on it.
Yes.
So that it automatically comes off after 3 years or 2 years or 5 years, whatever's an appropriate interval. And we're forced then to take action if somebody needs to have that report continued. We've got to take action to continue it. Otherwise, it drops out of existence.
I think that's probably how it would be up to the people receiving the report, if they deem it necessary for them to come back. That's us.
And I think, I think that's just good business practice, no matter where it's at. I think anytime you're collecting any information, one of the things when I was working in a local school system is that we would try to come back at least annually or every 2 years so that these documents always stayed evergreen. I don't care if it's information you're asking for or if it's rules that you've enacted or whatever it is. Does it still apply? Is it still applicable? And how can we keep it green? Maybe our process has changed slightly, so we need to update our documents to make sure we're all doing the same things. And that makes a lot of sense.
I think another thing that we as legislators need to be a little more cognizant of is when we require something from the Department of Education, their source of information is downstream. So they're going to require it from the local system, who in turn go downstream and require it from that local school principal, who in turn is going to go downstream and require it from the teacher, who may say something on has to transfer the information.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to be very cautious about how we structure requests for information from local school systems or from the State Board of Education.
I would like to do that, and if we request a different report in one way, and part of education can come back and say, hey, well, we don't have exactly what you're looking for, we've got this, and this, can that substitute for what you're looking at without having to generate a report just because we say it, don't mean it's the word of God, it's got to be done that way.
That's a good point. See what you have, and if what you have is sufficient, then why do it?
Yeah, well, I do it, you have something to look at, get showed the same.
I don't know how you word that, but
We were asked for an ABP program, we got sent out, and the CBA, sure they got to respond to
Yeah, but that hadn't all been negative. Over the years, when legislative committees have asked for information, whether it's budgetary or whether it was information that was accountability, used for accountability, if the department didn't have it, it alerted them to the point of things that might be needed. Now, the question is, did the legislative committee ask for something that was really needed? In most of the instances, when I was up here, I thought that we were pretty solid in terms of what we needed to determine, an outcome of either giving money or coming with a new accountability issue through legislation. And I think that the department, whereas they might not have appreciated all of that at the time, it did, and it caused them to have to restructure, if you please. And they did. And they got better. And of course, now, over the years, I'll make one more last little silly statement here, but when Franklin Shoemake was associate or deputy superintendent, the first thing he did was get the department to send him every request form that they sent out to school districts. And they covered his office up. You would not have believed it, because we went up and looked at it. It's just everywhere. Well, what was the result? This forward was to reduce paperwork. The result was more paperwork. That's true. And it was just difficult for them to get the handle on all of that. The suggestion that was made right here is every 2 or 3 years, come back in and let's re-examine and let's determine whether this is now needed. Does it need to be updated? Does it need to, go into to be done away with? And that's a very good recommendation in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I'd probably like to see a group, a committee such as this meet periodically and do what we do on do. But at the same token, I think it'd be a good exercise for the State Board of Education every couple of years to form a similar committee which involved local school system personnel. DOE staff can't do it by themselves because they see it from one set of eyes. You need to have the other set of eyes there to talk about it from their perspective also. So that certainly is a recommendation also to do. Because I'll tell you, when we first had the idea for doing this study committee, our belief was that we were going to find a lot of reports that we could go into the code and say, we don't need this anymore. And what we found out was that there are not near as many of them required in the code as there are required from the State Department of Education. And that what appears to be a fairly simple or straightforward thing in legislative action becomes a relatively large report when the State Board gets through deciding what all they want to go along with it. I think that's part of having a gender equity. It had some fairly simple language, and it became a fairly large requirement for its group. What else?
I'd like to know if our friends from GA and Tage had anything in particular, teacher level, that the teachers would like to see revised, eliminated, or...
They'd like to see the same action taking place at the local school system.
Yeah.
As I said at the last meeting, finding a way, this committee's not, doesn't have the time and whatever, you're all dealing with it, 5 miles up. What the system has to send out. As Chairman said, a lot of this stuff, though, gets driven down to the classroom level. We'd like to see, coming out of this, a recommendation for some kind of task force or study that looks at the impact of paperwork requirements at the classroom level. Our survey, and I'll give you also a compilation of the blog comments that we set up with our survey, shows that it is a significant morale factor. It goes to working conditions. And basically, I would call it a lot of surveys have shown in Georgia that not enough time. And paperwork is blamed for a lot of what's robbing that time from. And as I mentioned before, a simple suggestion, maybe on something that would be printed on forms. Who's requiring this and what purpose? because I saw a lot of frustration in the comments about we can't find out, or we get, when we ask, one person tells us it's No Child Left Behind, another person tells us the school system, the DOE, and it's very frustrating. They feel like, a lot of teachers feel like it's a waste of time and a tremendous duplication. You know, that's got to be another wave, I think, to look at the impact of classroom.
Yeah, that may take another task force, another study committee. We received similar kind of comments. Is if it's necessary, then let's see if we cannot reduce it at the system level without going to the teacher or at the state level. And once we get the information system in place, we may need to do that. But it does go downstream, and sometimes it's just absolutely necessary. If there's any way we can protect the teacher's time on task and teaching and learning in the classroom, that's the key. But I think y'all may be on the right track with some of this recommendations you come up with. It might help, but that's where we're coming from.
Well, I know Gwinnett County, this is, I've been involved with the schools there for probably about 12, 15 years. And I was basically a PTA for 10 different terms, but I hear from the teachers that a lot of times they come and give me their views. And of course, I come from a family of teachers and principals, and I do, and it is the teachers, and they're the ones that we really need to be getting representatives from every school somewhere and getting a list together and see perhaps what is it that you feel is the problem. Again, I do know that in county like Gwinnett and DeKalb, those are big counties, and they're pulling a lot of local references together too. But to do this on a state level like this, I'm sitting here just listening. Gosh, I'm blown away. But to me, I really feel like eventually we need to work toward that and go on a county by county basis and try to work it up and back to the state. Task force, that's my convention.
This is, I was reading the page report right here, and y'all had the response to surveys, y'all sent out several surveys. And we got some
Yeah.
should we get that?
Well, the other thing I have is kind of a compilation of the blog report that you all look at. But I knew from where you were at the last meeting that you're not going to be able to deal with that level in this, this framework that you got going to study committee. So I'll give that to you. Yeah.
Well, some of your recommendations might help with some of that, if you can eliminate some.
Yeah, we could eliminate some of that. One of the people here that said require the school level district administrators to audit the reports they require and ask, is it necessary to use it, what to do with the data, why is it collected? Who has to collect it? Why does that particular person have to do it? A lot of this is classroom teacher.
More involved.
It's a classroom teacher going through and picking up all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, I believe we got classroom teachers.
If you're going to get paid, you got to report to the paper.
Yeah.
When I was in the classroom, everybody complained about the attendance rates.
Right.
I was going to say, yeah.
They still don't like it.
Well, we don't have any more.
Well, I got they call somebody didn't like the truancy reports. People mad about truancy reports.
It may replace the.
Have to keep up with all the days out.
Apply different reports.
And we're actually developing a lot of this reports ourselves, so from all the truancy.
And you could not ink that attendance book in until the end of the day. So somebody might come in.
Yeah.
Not super good.
There was a great deal of inaccuracy on that, but you used to get paid by.
Yeah.
That's
Yes, I mean,
Right.
under APA, you earn teachers based on
That's right.
the first 4 months of attendance as reported by the registrar.
That's right.
That's why you didn't make it in at the end of the day, because one might come in.
Well, today, on technology, we have things like SmartWeb. So SmartWeb is where the teacher has all of the students, that are in the class that are on this screen. And all she has to do is just hit it, and it goes automatically down to the central office and records, that attendance. Now, we've got it middle and high school. We also have a technology program for the elementary. But the elementary teachers are more resistant to the technology. So we're having to do this thing on a rollout and do the training and get them comfortable with it so it gets used. Now, until that happens, you will get a report. They're imposing more stuff on us. But you're going to have that attendance. So that the student's not in the classroom, and the teacher's not in the classroom, instruction's not taking place. And so you've got to have that.
Yeah, but a lot of schools and school systems throughout this state do not have what you just shared.
No, actually, they're still doing it.
That's right, yeah.
It still has to be
More don't have it than do.
That's right, you're right.
Let me go down this list of things that I think I've written down that what you said, if I heard you correctly, let me correct it. Tell me you've got something different. Consolidated report that we encourage continuity for a period of time, small, minor changes don't do a major overhaul. Gender equity, move the language to that relates to reporting participation, make that also report. Should be able to be pulled from financial data. Check on the Education Coordinating Council and the reports that are required of it. If that council no longer exists, let's remove that language from code. Check for the language that requires a market study of salaries. Market study code, remove it, or else request that the study be done.
It'd be nice to have it, but...
Bye-bye.
Review the driver's license, the revocation requirements. See what can be done to correct that. Recommendation for sunset provision for future reporting requirements, both from DOE and local systems. Recommend caution in requiring new reports. Recommend an ongoing task force to continue to look at this in future years at the legislative level, and also recommend a task force at the DOE level involving local school system folks. I wrote down his suggestion, forms required to show who requested and why.
That was very, I know people did talk before, they had asked about the classroom level reporting, what reports take a look at the teaching time, what's required, and who do these reports go to. I guess that's part of this.
Yeah.
Something here just
Captured in there, yeah.
And I think that's what basically we're saying, that the task force at the DOE level might be able to get a handle on that, or at least we want to be careful that we don't say all 108 school systems have to have a task force. Another round of paperwork.
Mr. Chairman, it might be interesting to sunset all reporting for 12 months and then see how much the reports are missed and let people re-request that they be implemented.
Just how much trouble are you trying to get?
You might be amazed at the ones that, hey, well, we didn't ever use that thing to begin with.
Well, that's the whole thing, I think it's just some of that out. And it's reports coming in from the state report that whoever asked for it's been dead and gone 50 years.
But I think the thing I have found is that some of these reports that are required that go to the speaker and to the Lieutenant Governor, chairmen of the two education committees.
Normally, they say report to the General Assembly, and that's it. They don't say to an individual.
But either way it comes, I mean, basically probably goes back to.
They go to the Speaker, go to the House
Speaker's
and
office.
Senate Ed,
To the-
Lieutenant Governor, and they look at them and say, what do we do with
There's
this?
somebody out there who may still come in and want to see that. Now, are we going to continue to do it because this individual over here wants to see that information, or are we going to do it because the legislature itself has some need for it? I think that those are two very different rationales. I think
So have a survey of your leadership to see
If
who asked for those
If
things.
the department has it on file, then you had a request from legislator that they could pull it, the request. I mean, you pull it if you need it.
Now, my only problem with that is that if they're having to gather the data to sit there just in case somebody requests it, then you're still gathering the data and you're able to
Not,
accomplish the whole idea.
Yeah, but not really reducing anything.
Alan, has a department, or did I miss it? You may have shared this, has a department staff looked at all the reports that are required now to see what reports are really not used? Have y'all done that?
They've been
Or is
working
it
on that.
possible?
Yeah.
I thought I heard you say that. So this could help by eliminating some that are not necessary.
Yeah, from my conversations with Bennett, I mean, I think certainly when you have this study committee, it creates some awareness and creates some conversation.
Yeah, I thought I understood that they were really looking at it. Yeah.
Did you have anything else in the notes that you put over there?
Did we go through the reports of Betsy, this thing that she had done, the statutory report of the Parks Local School System, and that's the report she gave us, and that could be that.
There was one, 20-2-168, probable annual requirements and school equipment supply and services. Annual report required state board, and we had a question about whether or not that was needed. I don't have a question.
That's the
Does
law.
anybody want that listed in the board? Any other comments?
All of the annual requirements, standard school equipment, supply and services.
Betsy, which one was that?
20-2-168.
Annual inventory report.
I'm proud to say our school system finally got off the auditor's list of compliance with our F&E audit. Took us 20 years to finally come off of that.
I'm not going to advocate that local systems don't need to keep a fairly accurate inventory. If you've got a school fire, you don't have any proof of loss.
Yeah, we have to do that.
But
I think I sent it to the state. You talk about downstream, it starts in the classroom, and the school, and the system, and, you gotta have all that.
But this was a probable.
Yeah, right, the state, I don't see what the state needs it. Because they don't pay the insurance premium. Well, they do in the regular.
We got a lot of that going on with schools too, and whatever. I know you guys in the sand area.
What about 20-2-250? Is that pilot projects report?
Yeah, Gina just mentioned that one. That was, I don't know, the last meeting, that Stewart said that they hadn't received one of those in quite some time. And that report goes to the Appropriations and Education Committee, Assembly. And I think that, I need to find out from the committee whether or not they needed that. Really like that. That was definitely one that was either.
one of the reasons they haven't received those reports out there is there haven't been those, we haven't funded some of those special projects lately. Doesn't that be the case?
Yeah, so this is, I don't get the impression, I'm not, the expectation, but I don't think it's a requirement of every local school system unless they haven't had a pilot project there, and that kind of triggers the reporting part for that. So I
I don't think you want to have a pilot project that doesn't have some requirement for a follow-up study or reports that is affecting this.
Leave it on the books if you need it.
All these attendance reports, all these reports now, are they, that's supposed to be all be done electronically through the reporting system, so that's supposed to be fairly easy to file now, I guess.
You got your FTE reporting, and that's what really matters, because that's where your money is.
We have 20-2-697, names, ages, residence, all students reported by principals and teachers.
This is for truancy purposes.
For what?
Truancy purposes. Yeah, I had a note that we were going to talk about removing those requirements, because I think there was some discussion about it all done electronically now anyway, and the physical report isn't necessary, that the head officer has access to all that electronically.
At the local system.
Right. And it goes to the state.
And you know, that protocol committee that was established made all kinds of recommendations in these areas, but that was all for local. None of those were called for reporting back to the state, to my knowledge.
The attendance protocol.
What was the code section again?
It's on the board agenda today, the annual charter school report. About 100 pages. It has to come to the General Assembly. It'd be interesting to see how many of them ever see it.
Well, I tell you too, I think that
If they looked at it, they'd find out we don't need as many charter schools as we got.
well, it depends on how you support it. You don't
Reporting ain't real smooth.
conversion and startup, put them all together, it looks better. Now, I don't know whether, Roy has done that. Recommended they do it.
Put them all together.
They're still all together. See, that's what a useless report. It's a report that really works better to try and sell program than it is to evaluate the program.
And in that, I had another bill on 20-2-740, mentioned.
Which one's that?
That was disciplinary replacement action, of course, something about the Department of Education.
You heard it go on.
Still do that.
On the schools that were really
Discipline
out
report
of
is
control against
Well, Judy said, well, they don't never approve another.
I believe that is collected
from the student
in the
record.
student record.
Yeah. I believe this transmitted all electronically.
This was an annual report that had to be done, so we need an annual report, this all coming in, or is it done annually, or how do we get that?
That's done at the end of the year.
Oh, it's done at the end of the year. We just got to electronically now, so that we need that.
Right, well, I mean, I think that
Just leave it on there.
report is kind of a generic term, and I think that covers reporting electronically or by paper.
Okay, all right, so it's still there.
Okay, I've added on these attendance reports, and we'll look at those and see how many of those can be removed. And the inventory report, if there's some kind of change in the language for that. Is it acceptable with y'all for us to try to put this together in a report form and then get it to you?
Yeah, we were adjourned.
And if y'all like to see that before it gets finalized?
Sure. Love to. Love to. You got
You
email.
have our email addresses.
We'll have it here, we will notify you when you can come by and pick it up.
I'll tell you what.
December 24th.
Just another report.
Let me suggest this right there to Dixon. Have Santa Claus drop by down the chimney. So I'll have a bet there.
I'll be getting things time to call.
If anybody
No,
Mr. Chairman.
we trust y'all.
We will stand adjourned under second. It's a painful to come and be a part of this.
Thank you for doing this.
We appreciate your input through the 3 meetings that we had.
Because you have no bill.
We'll see if we can do something with some of this. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.